The first rays of morning light slipped through the broken blinds of the small apartment. They painted pale golden lines across the messy floor, over the half-empty coffee cups, and over the worn-out couch that had long ago lost its shape. The tiny fan above the ceiling spun lazily, groaning like an old man with every rotation. Alex shifted in his bed, his body heavy with the familiar weight of another restless night. For a moment he thought he was alone, the way he had been for so many years. Loneliness had become his silent roommate long before anyone else had entered his life. But when he turned on his side, his tired eyes froze. Someone was there. Not just someone. Her, Liara, the alien. His roommate. Her presence was so strange and yet by now not entirely unfamiliar. The first time he had seen her, he could hardly believe his own eyes. Her skin wasn't like human skin. It carried a soft shimmer, as if liquid silver and pale blue had been woven together under the surface. In the dark, she glowed faintly like the quiet light of the moon on still water. Her hair flowed across the pillow like strands of molten metal, every lock catching the light in ways that made it look alive. She didn't breathe like humans did. There was no rise and fall of heavy lungs, no wheeze, no sigh. Instead, her chest moved in slow rhythms, and from her throat came a low humming sound, almost like a lullaby sung by the stars themselves. For Alex, mornings were usually empty things. Wake up, stare at the ceiling, drag himself out of bed and face another day that felt like all the others. But this morning he found himself staring at a creature who came from a world he could not even imagine, sleeping peacefully under the same worn blanket he had owned for years. He blinked hard, rubbing his eyes. But she didn't vanish. It wasn't a dream. It had been weeks since she first arrived. He remembered the night clearly. The government's refugee program had asked for volunteers to host alien survivors, those whose planets had been burned and broken by wars Alex could not even pronounce. At first, he hadn't planned on signing up. What could a man like him possibly offer to someone who had lost everything? But something in his heart had whispered, why not? And so after filling out papers and answering questions, he was given a name. Liara. At first, everything had been awkward. She didn't understand Earth food, didn't like the smell of fried eggs, and had never used a shower. They barely spoke, not because they disliked each other, but because silence was easier. He had his grief and she had hers. They lived side by side, two broken pieces that didn't quite know how to fit. But slowly, something had changed. She had started asking about small things. Why humans laughed at moving shadows on a television screen. Why he sometimes stared out of the window for hours. Why he kept a small framed picture on his desk but always turned it face down when she entered the room. Now, lying there beside her in the pale light of dawn, Alex felt something stir inside his chest. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't even comfort. It was something quieter, recognition. As if, in her silence and strangeness, he had found someone who understood the heavy weight of waking up each morning with emptiness inside. The fan groaned again. Outside, a distant dog barked. The world was as ordinary as always, but in that small room, something extraordinary was happening. Alex studied her face. She looked peaceful but also fragile, as if one wrong breath might shatter her. He wondered what she dreamed about. Did she dream of her lost home? Of skies filled with constellations humans had never seen? Did she dream of her family? The people she had whispered about once when she sat on the balcony late at night, pointing out the stars that reminded her of names she could no longer speak without trembling. He remembered that night vividly. She had whispered, "They are gone. All of them. The war took them. My world is only ashes now." And then she had fallen silent, her glowing eyes fixed on Earth's sky, searching for something she would never find. Alex had not known what to say. He had simply stood beside her, his own silence heavy with memories he rarely spoke of. The accident, the funeral, the empty years that followed. Maybe that was why he hadn't turned her away when the program asked. Maybe he knew what it was like to lose everything and still wake up the next day unsure why. Now, as he lay there, she stirred. Her glowing eyes flickered open, slow and gentle like the sunrise. She turned her head toward him, and for a brief moment Alex felt as though the universe itself was staring straight into him. Her lips parted, and her voice came out soft, broken, almost uncertain. "Alex," she whispered, his breath caught. "Yeah?" She looked at him for a long time and then asked the question that would stay with him forever. Why do humans choose to live? Even when everything hurts? The words struck him like a blow. They weren't casual curiosity. They weren't small talk. They came from the raw wound inside her, from the ashes of her world, from the hollow place where her people's duty had once lived. Alex froze. His throat tightened and he couldn't breathe for a moment. Of all the questions she could have asked, about food, about music, about the stars, she had asked that and he had no idea how to answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. The fan groaned again. The golden light grew brighter. Alex stared at the ceiling, his heart pounding. He thought of all the mornings he had woken up wishing he hadn't. He thought of the chains of grief that had kept him alive when he didn't want to be. He thought of the tiny, fragile reasons he had clung to, the smell of rain, the sound of laughter, the warmth of coffee in cold hands. His lips trembled. I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. But Liara's eyes didn't leave him. She waited as if his answer might decide not just her day, but her very existence, and in that moment, Alex realized this wasn't just a question, it was a plea. The air in the small bedroom felt heavier after her words. The hum of the ceiling fan, the faint barking of dogs outside, even the early whistle of a passing train seemed distant and unimportant. All that remained was Liara's question, hanging between them like something fragile and sharp at the same time. Why do humans choose to live, even when everything hurts? Alex lay frozen. He could feel his pulse in his throat, in his fingertips, in his chest. His first instinct was to laugh it off, to say something light, something that would make the moment easier. But one look at Liara's eyes stopped him. They were not just curious eyes. They were desperate. Her silver blue pupils glowed faintly, but behind that glow Alex saw a depth of sorrow he could barely understand. She was not asking about humans in general. She was asking about him. For weeks she had lived in his apartment like a shadow. She rarely spoke unless he asked her something. She spent long hours on the balcony, staring at the sky as if she expected someone to appear from the stars. Sometimes, when the nights were silent, Alex thought he heard her whisper names of people who were gone. And now, in the pale morning light, she was asking him why he, a human, kept choosing to live. Alex turned on his back and stared at the ceiling. Words crowded his mouth, but none of them felt right. He wanted to say, because that's what we do, or because it gets better, but he knew how shallow that would sound. He thought of the accident, the screech of tires, the crushing sound of metal, the blood. He thought of the funerals, of the empty chairs at dinner tables, of the photographs that he kept turned face down. He thought of the nights when the only reason he hadn't given up was because he was too tired to act. His lips parted, but the only words that escaped were broken. I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that. Liara tilted her head. Her hair shimmered against the pillow, catching the morning light. Why not you? She whispered. Alex let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. Because I've asked myself the same question too many times. And most days, I didn't have an answer. Liara's eyes did not leave him. Her silence pressed against him, not heavy but expectant. She was waiting. Not just for words, she was waiting for something real. Alex swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He closed his eyes, his voice dropping low, almost trembling. There were days when I didn't want to wake up. Days when living felt like dragging a chain that never ends. I didn't stay alive because I was brave or because I believed in some great meaning. I stayed because of small things, tiny things, the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of fresh coffee, a stranger smiling at me when I was too lost in my own head. He opened his eyes again and turned his head toward her. I stayed because of those little things. Not because life was easy, but because I wasn't ready to let the darkness make the choice for me. Liara blinked slowly. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. For the first time since she had arrived, Alex saw her not as an alien refugee, not as a stranger, but as someone painfully human in her own way. She was broken. Her world had been reduced to ash, her family erased by a war that humans could barely comprehend. She was carrying grief so massive that silence was the only language left to her. And yet in that grief, she had turned to him for an answer. The weight of that trust made Alex's chest ache. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, he added softly, but it's the only one I have. For a long time, Liara didn't move. She just stared at him, her glowing eyes shimmering as if they held unshed tears. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaking. My people, we did not live for small things. We lived for duty. Every life had a place, a task, a purpose. When duty ended, life ended. It was simple, but then the war came. Duty ended for all of us at once. And now, her voice cracked. Now I do not know why I wake up. Her confession cut through Alex like a knife. He could hear the pain in every word, the emptiness in her voice. For her, survival wasn't strength, it was confusion. She wasn't asking why humans lived. She was asking why she should keep living. Alex felt his own eyes sting. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone. But fear held him back. What if his words weren't enough? What if nothing he said could fill the void she carried? Still, something inside him whispered that silence would be worse. He turned onto his side, facing her fully now. His voice was rough but steady. You don't need a grand reason, Liara. You don't need duty or destiny. Sometimes, one small reason is enough to keep you here. And maybe tomorrow you'll find another one. And then another. That's how we do it. That's how we keep going. Liara's lips parted but no sound came. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Real tears that glowed faint blue as they slid down her cheeks. The sight broke Alex's heart. He had seen her strong, silent, untouchable, but now she looked fragile, almost childlike in her grief. And still she listened. Alex's hand moved before he could stop it. Gently he reached out and placed it over hers. Her skin was cool, almost metallic, but beneath it he felt a faint pulse. Life. You're here, he whispered. And that's reason enough to keep going. At least for today. Her hand trembled under his touch, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her glowing eyes searched his face as if trying to decide whether to believe him. And for the first time since he had met her, Alex saw something new in her gaze. Not just grief, not just loss, but a spark. Small, fragile, almost invisible, but it was there. Hope. The silence that followed was different. Not heavy, not unbearable. It was soft, like the quiet after a storm. Liara closed her eyes again, and though the tears still slipped down her cheeks, her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. And Alex, lying there beside her in the morning light, realized that her question had not only changed her, it had changed him too. The silence in the room was long, but it was not empty. It was alive. It carried everything Alex had confessed, everything Liara had whispered, and everything neither of them had the courage to say yet. Alex lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts twisting and colliding like storm clouds. His chest still felt tight from speaking truths he usually buried deep inside. He had not planned to share so much. He hadn't even meant to speak. But Liara's question had torn open something inside him, something that had been locked for years. Liara, meanwhile, was lying very still. Her glowing eyes were open, fixed on him, but she did not blink as often as humans did. It gave her gaze a strange, haunting intensity, as though she could see through him. The faint blue shimmer of her skin caught the golden morning light, and for a moment Alex thought she looked like a painting, beautiful but fragile, as if one touch might tear the canvas. She did not repeat her question. She did not press him for more. She simply remained there, silent, as if her stillness was her way of saying she had heard him. For Alex, that silence was almost unbearable. He had lived with silence for years, and it had always felt heavy, like chains pressing him down. But this silence was different. It was shared. And that made it harder. He turned slightly, looking at her face. You know, he said softly, sometimes silence is the only answer. Not because we don't care, but because we don't know how to put things into words. Liara blinked slowly, her glowing pupils narrowing. On my world, she whispered. Silence was shame. Silence meant you had failed your duty, but here, it feels different. Alex thought about that. He thought about the long evenings when he had sat alone on the couch, beer in hand, staring at a turned-down picture frame. Silence had been his prison then, but now lying here with Liara, it was something else. Not freedom, but not punishment either. It was connection without words. Still, he felt he should speak. He owed her something. Liara, he began, hesitating. I don't think I ever thanked you. Her head tilted slightly, her silver hair spilling across the pillow. Thanked me? For what? For being here, Alex said. His voice trembled, but he pushed on. This apartment was so empty before you came. I thought I wanted it that way, but I didn't. I was just too tired to admit I was lonely. Liara's lips parted, and for a moment he thought she might laugh at him or dismiss his words. But instead her face softened. "I was afraid when they told me I would live with a human," she whispered. "I thought you would hate me, that I would only remind you of everything your species fears." Alex frowned. "Why would you think that?" "Because my kind lost everything," Liara said, her voice shaking. "We are ghosts of a burned world. Many humans look at us and see only ruin, not people." Her words stung. Alex had seen the news. He remembered the debates, the protests, the people who called the alien refugees a burden. And yet here she was, sitting in his room, more human than many of the people he knew. "I don't see you that way," Alex said firmly. "I see someone who's trying. And that's more than I can say about a lot of people." Her eyes glowed brighter for a moment, as though his words lit something inside her. Then she looked down, silent again, her fingers curling lightly against the blanket. The quiet stretched, but it was softer now, less heavy. It felt like a bridge instead of a wall. Alex shifted, propping himself on one elbow. "Do you want to know something?" Liara looked at him curiously. "When you asked me why humans keep living even when it hurts, I realized something." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We don't always keep living for ourselves. Sometimes we keep going because someone else is watching. Someone else needs us to answer, even when we don't have the answer ourselves." Liara blinked, her lips parting slightly as if the thought surprised her. Alex continued, his voice low but steady. "This morning, if it was just me, I don't know what I would have done. But because you asked me that question, I had to answer. And in trying to answer you, I realized, I want to keep going." Liara's breath hitched, though it came out as a faint hum instead of a human gasp. Her glowing tears shimmered again at the corners of her eyes. She whispered, "Then maybe that is how I will survive too, not by finding all the answers myself, but by borrowing yours." The words hit Alex harder than he expected. He felt something warm break open in his chest, something that had been frozen for years. He reached out again, hesitating only a second before gently touching her hand. She didn't pull away. Her cool, metallic-like skin felt strange under his warmth, but the pulse beneath it was real, alive. "Then borrow as much as you need," Alex said softly. "And maybe one day you'll find your own reason. Until then, we'll share mine." Liara's lips trembled into something fragile, something that was not quite a smile but close enough. She whispered almost too quietly to hear, "Shared silence, shared reasons. That feels human." Alex chuckled weakly, though his eyes were wet. "Yeah, it does." The two of them lay there, not speaking anymore. The silence returned, but now it was theirs. It was no longer empty. It was filled with grief, yes, but also with something fragile and new, something worth holding on to. Outside, the sun climbed higher, painting the world in light. And in that small, messy room, a human and an alien lay side by side, learning how to live again, not alone, but together. The apartment was quiet now, but the quiet was no longer heavy. It was soft, almost alive, filled with unspoken thoughts and the fragile understanding that had grown between them. Alex shifted on the bed, staring at Liara. Her glowing eyes watched him with careful attention, as if she could feel every heartbeat, every tremor of doubt and fear inside him. For a long time he said nothing. Words felt inadequate. How could he tell her about the nights he wanted to disappear? How could he explain the emptiness that had lingered for years? The heavy weight that had pressed on him until he barely remembered what it was like to feel alive. Yet here she was, an alien who had lost everything, watching him with silent patience. And suddenly he realized she wasn't asking for facts or logic. She was asking for truth. Pure raw truth. He took a deep breath. The words were heavy at first, like dragging himself through water, but they began to flow. "There was a night," he began quietly, "after the accident. I thought about not waking up. The pain was too much, the grief too sharp. Every day felt like climbing a mountain only to be pushed back down. I didn't see a reason to go on." Liara's eyes softened. She didn't interrupt. She simply listened. That was all he needed, that and her silent permission to be real. Alex continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I stayed alive because I was scared. Scared of leaving, scared of forgetting, scared of what it meant if I stopped. But every day, every single day, I wondered if I was strong enough to face it again. And sometimes I wasn't." He closed his eyes, recalling the nights he had spent staring at the ceiling, wishing the world would just stop, wishing that someone, anyone, would understand the hollow ache inside him. But then, he said, opening his eyes again, sometimes, something small saved me. A song on the radio that reminded me of something I loved. A smile from a stranger that reminded me I wasn't invisible. A warm cup of coffee that made the world feel softer for a moment. Tiny things, tiny pieces of life that told me maybe tomorrow could be better. He paused, unsure if his words were enough, unsure if she could even understand the human need to cling to fragments of hope. Liara's hand twitched slightly. Her glowing tears reflected the morning light, tracing lines down her cheeks. Fragments? That is how humans survive? She asked softly. Yes, Alex said. Fragments, small lights in the dark. That's all any of us have sometimes, and that's enough. It has to be. The confession had taken something out of him, a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying, but in her presence it felt lighter, almost bearable. He noticed how her hand moved slightly closer to his, a subtle gesture that said more than words ever could. Liara's voice was hesitant, soft, and almost afraid. I do not know how to survive without duty, without something to anchor me. On my world, everything had meaning. Every action, every breath, it mattered, and now, nothing matters. I wake up and wonder why. Why continue? Alex's heart ached at her words. He could see her pain, and he recognized it. She was carrying grief like a wound that never healed, and it mirrored his own in ways he had never expected. You don't have to have duty to survive, he said gently. You just need a reason, one small reason, one tiny piece of hope to hold on to, and tomorrow you'll find another, and the day after another. That's how we do it. That's how we keep going when it feels impossible. Liara's eyes shimmered with quiet wonder. A reason like your small things, she whispered. Alex nodded. Yes. One thing that tells you life is still worth waking up for. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to make sense. Just something. And then tomorrow you'll find another, and another after that. That's how humans survive. We keep stacking little lights until the darkness can't touch us anymore. Her gaze softened further. She reached her hand toward his, a delicate, trembling gesture. Alex took it without hesitation. Her skin was cool, almost metallic, but the warmth beneath it was undeniable. Her pulse throbbed faintly, a reminder that despite everything she had lost, she was still alive, still here, still trying. I want to try, Liara whispered, to find my reason to wake up, even when it hurts. Can I borrow your fragments for now? Alex's chest tightened with emotion. He had never expected her to ask that, to place her trust in him so completely, to admit her vulnerability so openly. He nodded. Of course. Take as many as you need, and when you're ready, you'll find your own. I promise, I'll help you. Liara's glowing tears spilled down her face again, but this time they were not just sorrow. There was relief there, hope. Fragile, trembling, and faint, but unmistakable. Alex squeezed her hand gently. We don't have to fix everything today, he said softly. We just have to survive it, one day at a time. That's all anyone can do. For the first time since her arrival, Liara let herself lean closer, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. He could feel the subtle hum of her breath, the faint rhythm of life that was both alien and achingly real. I think I understand, she whispered. Maybe life is not about having all the answers. Maybe it is about holding on to small lights, holding on to others who will help you find them. Alex smiled faintly, though his eyes were still wet. Exactly. And you don't have to do it alone. You never did. The room grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. The fan continued its lazy spin. The world outside moved on. But inside that small apartment, two souls, human and alien, shared something profound. A confession had been made. A bridge had been built. And though the wounds each carried were far from healed for the first time, both of them felt a flicker of light inside the darkness, and it was enough. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the apartment with light that made the shadows retreat slowly across the walls. But even as the room brightened, the weight of what Liara carried did not vanish. Alex could see it in the way her shoulders slumped, in the tiny tremble of her hands, in the faint hum of sorrow that vibrated beneath her calm exterior. She had opened up before, revealing fragments of her past, but the full scope of her pain was something Alex had not yet truly faced. And now, after his confession, it was as if the floodgates had been nudged open. Liara began, her voice barely above a whisper. I have seen everything I loved burn. My home, my people, even the stars we once called our own. They are gone. All of it. Alex listened, his hand still holding hers. The metallic cool touch of her skin beneath his warmth made her vulnerability feel even more real. She was fragile. Not broken like a shattered vase, but like glass slowly cracking under pressure. And yet she was still breathing, still alive. Tell me, she continued, her voice trembling. How do you continue when the world itself feels like it wants you to end? Alex squeezed her hand gently. One day at a time, he said softly. One step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to take the next breath. Make it to the next moment and trust that you'll find a reason to take another. Her glowing eyes flickered at him. That is not enough for me, she whispered. On my world, life had rules, purpose, order. Each day had a meaning. When it ended, there was nothing left but emptiness. And now, here, I do not know my purpose. I do not know if I belong. Alex felt his chest tighten. He had known loss, known emptiness, but he had never imagined grief so deep that it could erase someone's sense of being entirely. And yet here she was, asking him for a reason to exist, and he realized that he had never been more human than in this moment. Liara, he said gently, maybe purpose is not given. Maybe it's made. You create it, little by little. You start with something small, something that makes you want to see the next sunrise. And then tomorrow, you add another. And the next day another. That is how we survive. That is how humans survive. She shivered slightly. Her hands moved closer to his, seeking warmth, seeking something solid to cling to. And if I cannot find it? She asked, her voice breaking. If I am too tired? Alex's heart ached. He knew that feeling all too well. He had felt the same despair in the darkest hours of his life. Then you take my hand, he said simply. And you let me be your reason for now. And tomorrow, you will find your own. You don't have to do it alone. Liara's lips trembled and faint tears traced glowing blue lines down her face. I never thought someone would say that to me. Never thought someone would see me. Not the surface, not the alien, but the soul inside. Alex's voice softened. I see you, Liara. I have seen you from the start. And you are worth every sunrise, every step, every fragment of hope we can find together. She leaned closer, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. The pulse beneath her cool skin was steady now, a rhythm that resonated with life itself. For the first time in weeks or maybe years, Alex felt a fragile calm settle over them. I want to try, Liara whispered. I want to survive even when it hurts. But I do not know if I can. The weight of what I have lost. It feels too much sometimes. You don't have to carry it alone, Alex said. Let me help you. We'll face it together. Liara's hand gripped his, stronger this time. The warmth of human touch, so simple yet so profound, seemed to ground her. She whispered again, softer. Together. I think I can try. Hours passed in that quiet, shared presence. Neither spoke much, but the air was full of unspoken understanding. They had confessed their fears, their grief, their vulnerabilities, and in that act a fragile bond had been forged. At one point Liara shifted, turning slightly to face him more fully. Her glowing eyes met his, and in them, Alex saw a mixture of sadness, hope, and a tentative courage that had not been there before. Alex, she said softly, I have lived so long with shadows, with loss, but you make it seem possible to see light again. He shook his head, a small smile forming despite the heaviness in his chest. It's not just me. It's you too. You're choosing to keep going even when it hurts. That is the real strength. Liara's eyes flickered and she whispered almost to herself. Strength. I thought it was duty. I thought strength was following rules. But maybe it is surviving anyway. Even when nothing tells you to. Even when everything is gone, Alex nodded. Exactly. You don't need a grand purpose to live. You need fragments, one small reason at a time. And each day you add another. That is how humans endure. And that is how you will endure too. Her lips trembled and she let herself rest against him a little longer. He could feel her subtle warmth now. Feel the gentle pulse beneath her skin. Life. She was alive, and in that simple truth, Alex felt a surge of quiet hope. Thank you, Liara whispered, her voice small but steady. Thank you for seeing me, for speaking to me, for sharing yourself. You don't need to thank me, Alex said softly. We are just helping each other survive. That is all life asks of us sometimes. The world outside continued its noisy, chaotic motion, but inside the apartment, time slowed. The fan spun lazily overhead. The golden light of morning stretched across the walls, soft and warm. And in that small room, two wounded souls, one human, one alien, began to heal gently, fragment by fragment. Liara's glowing tears faded, replaced by a faint shimmer of peace. She squeezed Alex's hand, a small, silent promise that she would try. And Alex, looking at her, realized that hope did not need to be grand or eternal. It only needed to exist for a moment. And that moment right here was enough. For the first time since she had arrived, Liara looked at him not with fear, not with grief, but with quiet trust. And for Alex, that trust was the most precious thing in the universe. The afternoon sun had climbed high, spilling golden light across the apartment. Dust motes floated lazily in the rays, catching and reflecting a million tiny pieces of warmth. But inside, the air felt alive with something more fragile and beautiful, something neither Alex nor Liara could name, yet both could feel. Liara still rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Her glowing skin shimmered softly, the faint blue hue mixing with the golden light to create a gentle glow that made her seem almost ethereal. Alex's hand rested over hers, still trembling slightly from the intensity of their shared confessions, yet grounding both of them in the present. For a long time, neither spoke. Words had been said, truths had been shared, but now the silence was different. It was quiet, yes, but no longer heavy or tense. It was soft and intimate, filled with a fragile kind of hope. Finally, Liara stirred. She lifted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. Alex, she whispered, her voice careful, trembling with uncertainty. I feel something I have not felt in a long time. Something light. Alex tilted his head, studying her expression. There was a flicker in her gaze, subtle yet undeniable. It was not just relief, nor was it happiness. It was curiosity. It was wonder. It was the first spark of life trying to grow again after long months of grief. That's good, he said softly. It means you're finding a reason to stay, even a small one. That's enough for now. Her lips curved into a faint, hesitant smile. It wasn't steady, not yet, but it was real. And for Alex, that small smile carried more weight than the sun outside. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice barely audible. To live, to keep waking up, to keep searching for fragments. It feels impossible. Alex leaned closer, brushing a strand of her shimmering hair away from her face. It is impossible sometimes, he said honestly. Every day can feel impossible. But the point isn't to do it perfectly. The point is to do it anyway. To keep breathing, keep moving, keep finding even one tiny light in the dark. That is all it takes. Liara's gaze softened, and she looked down at their hands intertwined on the blanket. And you are that light for me, aren't you? Alex blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected her to put it into words. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the admission settle in the room. Then quietly he nodded. I want to be, if you'll let me. Her lips trembled. She didn't speak, but she leaned closer again, resting her head lightly against his chest. The subtle hum of her breathing, or whatever it was that mimicked breathing, was steady now, and Alex felt his own heart slow, syncing with the fragile rhythm of hers. I think I understand something now, Liara whispered. Strength is not about duty or obligation. It is about surviving anyway. Even when everything is gone. Even when the world has abandoned you. Even when your own heart feels broken. Strength is rising again. Alex's chest tightened. Her words echoed the confessions he had shared. Yet they carried a beauty and clarity he hadn't been able to find himself. Exactly, he said softly. That is what humans do, and now, that is what you can do too. Her eyes shimmered faintly. Then, I will try, she said, determination mingling with vulnerability in her voice. I will rise again, even if it is only a small step at first. Alex smiled, though his eyes were wet. That is enough. One step is all it takes. One day, one fragment, and then another. You don't have to do it alone. Liara's fingers tightened slightly around his, and she whispered almost to herself, not alone. And in that single phrase, the world felt different. The past, the grief, the emptiness, they were still there, shadows lingering at the edges. But now, in that small apartment, in the quiet shared between them, a spark had been lit. A spark that promised life, that promised hope, that promised survival. For hours, they stayed that way. Words were no longer necessary. Every gesture, every glance, every heartbeat carried meaning. Alex could feel the subtle warmth of her presence, the pulse beneath her skin, the life that had returned to her after so long spent in grief. And Liara in turn could feel his grounding presence, the human fragility that was strong enough to carry both of them through darkness. Eventually, Liara lifted her head fully, meeting his gaze. "Alex," she said, her voice steady now, "I want to see the world, not as a survivor, not as someone broken, but as someone living. Can you show me?" Alex blinked, surprised. A thrill of joy passed through him. "I thought you'd never ask," he said with a small laugh. "Yes, we'll explore it together. Every small thing, every fragment of light. I'll be there." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her glowing eyes and trembled at the corners of her lips. It was fragile, yes, but it was alive. And for Alex, that smile became a beacon brighter than any sunbeam in the apartment. "Then," she whispered almost shyly, "I will try to find my own fragments too. Not just yours, but starting with yours. That feels safe." Alex's chest swelled with emotion. "That's all I could ever ask for," he said softly. And in that moment something shifted. The apartment, the world outside, the noise and chaos, all of it faded. There were only the two of them, breathing, existing, fragile but alive. The spark of hope that had begun to glow in the quiet shared between confessions and tears now burned just a little brighter, illuminating the edges of their pain, showing them that survival was possible. They spent the afternoon in quiet conversation, talking about small things, the smell of rain, the taste of coffee, the sound of birds outside the window. They laughed softly at misunderstandings, marveling at the differences between human life and Liara's world. Each small moment, each fragment of joy or curiosity, became a brick in the fragile bridge they were building between sorrow and hope. By the time evening arrived, the golden light had faded to soft amber, and the apartment was bathed in quiet warmth. Liara leaned against Alex's shoulder, her glowing skin shimmering faintly in the dying light. Her eyes reflected not sorrow, but the tentative beginnings of courage. I think I can face tomorrow," she whispered almost to herself. "I do not know if I will be strong, but I will try, and I have you." Alex nodded, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "That's all anyone can ever do," he said softly. "Just try, and keep trying. Together." The spark was small, yes, fragile, but it was real. And sometimes, Alex realized, that was all that mattered. The morning arrived quietly, but it felt different this time. The sun spilled golden light across the apartment, but it no longer carried the heaviness of shadows or the weight of grief. Instead, it seemed to glow with promise, as if the world itself had acknowledged the fragile hope that had taken root between Alex and Liara. Liara stirred beside him, her glowing skin shimmering softly in the morning light. She blinked, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear, courage, and something new, anticipation. For the first time since she had arrived, she was not hiding from the world. She was ready to step into it, carrying fragments of life she had begun to collect with Alex by her side. Alex watched her quietly, a faint smile on his lips. He had seen her pain, her grief, her vulnerability, but he had also witnessed her strength, the spark that had begun as a tiny flicker and now burned brighter, fragile but undeniable. "Good morning," he said softly, breaking the quiet. Liara's lips curved into a small smile. "Morning," she whispered. Her voice was gentle, calm, but there was a spark of determination hidden within it. "Alex, today, I want to try something new. I want to step outside. Not just for a moment, not just for fragments. I want to see the world. And I want to see it with you." Alex felt his chest tighten with emotion. Her words carried weight. Hope, courage, and trust. She was stepping into the unknown, carrying the scars of loss and the fragile promise of life, and she had chosen him to walk beside her. "Then we'll go," he said, his voice steady. "Step by step, fragment by fragment, we'll explore the world together." They dressed quietly, their movements slow and deliberate. Every gesture, every glance, every touch carried meaning. Even the simple act of brushing hair back or tying a shoelace became a moment of connection. The apartment, once filled with silence and shadows, now hummed with life and purpose. When they stepped outside, the city greeted them with noise, color, and movement. People walked past, unaware of the small miracle unfolding on the quiet street, where an alien and a human walked side by side, learning how to live again. The sunlight felt warmer against Liara's skin, reflecting in soft glimmers across her shimmering blue-silver tones. She paused, lifting her head to the sky, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "I have seen stars, but never streets like this. Never colors like this. Never ordinary life." Alex smiled. "Sometimes the ordinary is extraordinary," he said. "You just need to notice it. Fragments, remember?" Liara laughed softly, a sound like a delicate wind chime. "Fragments," she repeated. "Yes, I see now. This is my fragment. This moment." They walked through the city slowly, pausing to notice small things. The scent of freshly baked bread, the laughter of children, the sound of water running from a fountain. Each fragment was collected carefully, deliberately, like precious jewels. And with each one, Liara's steps grew lighter, her eyes brighter. At one point she stopped, turning to Alex with a hesitant expression. "Alex, I want to thank you," she whispered. "Not just for today, but for the mornings, for listening, for helping me breathe when I thought I could not. I would not have survived this alone." Alex took her hands in his, holding them firmly. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "We survived together, and we'll continue together. That is enough." Liara's glowing eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of life, of hope, of rebirth. She squeezed his hands gently, a silent promise that she would keep trying, that she would keep finding fragments, and that she would walk beside him through whatever came next. As the day passed, they discovered more fragments, small cafes filled with the smell of roasted coffee, a quiet park where leaves shimmered in the afternoon light, and a street musician whose song made Liara hum softly, though she did not know the words. Each fragment became a stitch in the delicate tapestry of her healing. By evening, they reached a quiet hill overlooking the city. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in shades of gold, pink, and deep purple. Liara stood beside Alex, her fingers still intertwined with his. She gazed at the horizon, and for the first time Alex saw not just sorrow or grief in her expression, but a quiet determination and wonder that had been absent for far too long. "I think," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "I think I understand now. Life is not about avoiding pain. It is about choosing to move forward anyway, about holding on to fragments and sometimes holding on to someone else. You have been my fragment, Alex, and now I want to find more of my own." Alex's chest swelled. "That's all anyone can ask for," he said. "One fragment at a time, one day at a time, and we'll be here for each other every step of the way." Liara turned to him, her glowing eyes shimmering like the first light of dawn. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for helping me, for being here." Alex smiled, brushing a strand of her shimmering hair away from her face. "We're in this together," he said softly. "And together, we'll make tomorrow brighter than today." The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a sky streaked with colors that felt almost alive. In that moment, Alex and Liara stood side by side, Not as broken souls, not as strangers, but as companions who had found fragments of hope in each other. And as night fell, the city lights flickered on, reflecting in Liara's glowing eyes. She leaned lightly against Alex, resting her head on his shoulder. In her eyes, he saw the spark of life rekindled, fragile yet unbreakable. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt the possibility of tomorrow. And for Alex, that was enough. Together they walked down the hill side by side into the city's embrace. Two beings, human and alien, wounded and scarred but alive. Together they had found something more than survival. They had found hope, companionship, and the courage to face each day. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright.